Hello and welcome. Today we're going to tackle something that I think a lot of us feel, but maybe we don't have the words for it. It's this quiet, constant pressure in the background of our lives, this relentless push to be, emotionally stable. It's held up as this golden ideal, right? A sign that you're mature, that you're professional, that you've got it all together. But what if that's not the whole story? What if this constant striving for a perfectly calm, flatlined emotional state is actually something much more damaging? What if this so-called virtue is, in reality, a kind of tyranny?
And that brings us to this incredibly sharp quote from psychologist Li Songwei, which is really the launchpad for our entire conversation today. Let's just sit with these words for a second. A tyranny of modern society. Wow, that's a strong phrase. It suggests this isn't a personal choice, but a kind of oppressive rule. And look at the two things he says it does. First, it pathologizes our normal feelings. You know what that means? It takes something completely natural, like feeling sad when something is lost, or angry when a boundary is crossed, and it recasts it as a medical problem, a symptom of a disorder that needs to be fixed. And second, it alienates us. It drives a wedge between who we really are and who we pretend to be. It turns us into, as he says, standardized products on an emotional assembly line. It's a chilling image, isn't it? The idea that we are being processed and packaged to be uniform and predictable. Let's dig into what that really means.
So here's our game plan for this explainer. We're going to treat this like an investigative report, almost like an archaeological dig into our own culture. First up, we're going to define and name this pressure, the tyranny of stability. Then we're going to trace its roots, its blueprint, to see where this idea even came from. After that, we'll look at the modern machinery, the emotional factory that's running full steam today. Then, and this is crucial, we'll calculate the true price we pay for this so-called perfection. And finally, we'll chart a course out, a way to reclaim our authentic emotional selves.
All right, part one. You can't fight an enemy you can't see, and you can't solve a problem you can't name. The first step in dismantling any kind of power structure is to expose it, to give it a name and drag it out into the light. So what do we call this invisible force that makes us feel guilty for having a bad day or ashamed for feeling anxious? The term we're going to use, and it's a perfect fit, is emotional Taylorism. Now, to really get this, we have to travel back in time to the early 1900s, to the noisy, greasy factory floors of the Industrial Revolution. There was this guy, an efficiency expert named Frederick Taylor, and he was obsessed with one thing: optimization. He would stand there with a stopwatch and study workers, breaking down every single physical movement, every lift, every turn, every motion, into its smallest possible parts to find the one best way to do it. His system, Taylorism, was all about eliminating wasted motion, standardizing tasks, and turning human beings into highly efficient, predictable parts of a machine. The goal was simple: maximum output, absolute control. So emotional Taylorism is just taking that exact same ruthless mechanical logic and applying it not to our bodies, but to our inner worlds. It's the ghost of the factory haunting our hearts. It looks at our organic, messy, unpredictable emotions, sadness, anger, fear, even ecstatic joy, and sees them as, as inefficient glitches. They're bugs in the system, wasted movements on our personal production line that need to be standardized, controlled, and ultimately eliminated.
And this is the central metaphor we'll keep coming back to: the emotional assembly line. Just picture it. We enter this system as raw material, unique, complex, full of potential. But then the pressure starts. The assembly line moves us through different stations. There is the workplace station, where you're told to be confidently decisive and never show stress. There's the social media station, where you have to perform curated happiness and success. There's even the family station, where you're supposed to be the cheerful, uncomplaining one. At each stop, parts of our authentic selves are shaved off, and a uniform professional or positive emotional output is bolted on. We're being shaped, smoothed, and polished until we become a standardized product, stamped with that coveted seal of approval: emotionally stable. But this process creates a huge gap, right? A painful split between the self we're performing for the world and the self we actually feel inside. That's alienation.
Now, an idea this powerful and pervasive doesn't just pop up out of nowhere. It has a history. It has a blueprint. And if we really want to understand the emotional Taylorism of today, we have to become historians for a moment. We need to trace its DNA back through the last 100 years or so, and see how this logic of control has slowly but surely conquered more and more of our inner territory.
When you lay it out like this, the pattern is just undeniable. It's a story in 3 acts, a century-long march of control that goes deeper and deeper into what it means to be human. Act 1. The 1910s. Frederick Taylor targets the body. Scientific management is all about making the worker's physical self an extension of the factory's machinery. Your movements are no longer your own. They belong to the stopwatch, to the efficiency expert, to the system. Then, decades later, we get Act 2. In the 1970s, the sociologist Harry Braverman pointed out that the logic had moved on. It was now targeting the mind. He called it deskilling. This was achieved by systematically separating the conception of work, the thinking, the planning, the creativity, the craft, from the execution of work. All the knowledge was pulled out of the worker and hoarded by management. The worker was left with only simple, mindless, repetitive tasks. They no longer needed to understand the whole process. This made them less powerful, more controlled, and of course, much easier to replace. And that brings us to Act 3, the final invasion, identified in the 1980s by sociologist Arlie Hochschild. The assembly line now came for the heart. She gave us the term emotional labor to describe jobs that require an employee to manufacture and display a specific required feeling. It's not just about what you do, it's about what you feel or what you pretend to feel. That flight attendant's calm, reassuring smile during turbulence, that's emotional labor. The fast food worker's relentless cheerfulness, that's emotional labor. That call center employee who has to remain polite while being yelled at, that's emotional labor. Your feelings are no longer your own private experience. They've become a product, a commodity to be managed and sold as part of your job. From body to mind to heart, the logic of the assembly line had finally conquered the entire person.
Okay, so that's the history, that's the blueprint, but how does that factory operate today? It's not just about our jobs anymore, is it? This pressure is everywhere. So what are the modern gears that have interlocked to create this massive, culture-wide emotional factory that keeps all of us on the production line?
I think it comes down to 3 huge forces that are all working together, reinforcing each other. First, you've still got capitalism's efficiency logic, but it's been supercharged. In the modern knowledge economy, an employee who is anxious or grieving or just having a bad day is seen as a bug in the system. They're a variable. They're unpredictable. A stable employee, on the other hand, is a predictable, reliable, efficient asset. They're a known quantity. So the system inherently selects for and rewards emotional suppression. Second, you have consumerism's experience logic. This is the idea that everything is a product, including you. We're all told we need to build our personal brand. Your life has to be curated into a pleasant user experience for others. This is so obvious on social media, where we perform a highlight reel of our lives, but it bleeds into the real world too. We feel this pressure to hide any product flaws like sadness, anger, or confusion, because who wants to consume a flawed product? And finally, you have technologism's optimization logic. Just as this pressure reaches its peak, technology swoops in with a supposed solution. It says, hey, are you feeling an inconvenient emotion? Don't worry, I can fix that for you. You've got wellness apps to track your mood, meditation apps that promise to eliminate stress, and even AI therapists that promise to debug your emotional code. They all come with this underlying promise of optimizing you for peak emotional performance. So you see how these 3 gears lock together? Capitalism creates the demand for a stable product. Consumerism makes you want to be that perfect product. And technologism gives you the tools to supposedly sand down your own rough edges. It's a powerful, self-perpetuating cycle.
So we go through this process. We work hard to become that perfect, stable, standardized product. But this transformation isn't free. It doesn't come without a cost. There's a hidden invoice that gets mailed to our psyche and to our body. And eventually, that bill comes due. So what is the real price of this emotional perfection?
Let's really pause on that question. What is the actual, tangible, human result of this whole system? What happens to a person who successfully internalizes this tyranny, who represses their natural ups and downs, and actually becomes that perfectly stable product the assembly line is designed to create?
The result is a really dangerous confusion between 2 very different things:
The tyranny of stability demands emotional suppression. Suppression is the act of pushing your feelings down, bottling them up, hiding them, or pretending they don't exist. It's putting on a happy face when you're crumbling inside. And the research on this, from psychologists like James Gross and others, is crystal clear. Suppression is a terrible strategy. It's incredibly draining on your mental resources. Think of it like holding a beach ball underwater. You can do it, but it takes constant, exhausting effort. And the moment you lose focus, the ball shoots up with even more force. And worse, it's actively harmful to your physical health. Now, what's genuinely healthy is something completely different: emotional regulation. Regulation doesn't start with hiding, it starts with acknowledging. It's the ability to notice your feelings, there's anxiety, to allow them to be there for a moment without judging them, and then to consciously choose how you want to respond in a constructive way. It's about being the wise and compassionate driver of your own emotional car, not pretending the engine is turned off when it's roaring. The tyranny, brilliantly and tragically, sells us suppression, but calls it the virtue of regulation.
And this table just lays the two paths bare. It's a stark choice. On one side, you have the goal of the tyranny, the standardized product. Its core belief is that emotions are annoying problems to be eliminated. The primary goal is control, predictability, and above all, avoiding discomfort. It views so-called negative emotions like sadness or anger not as information, but as a sign of weakness, a sickness that needs to be cured. And this fosters a really brutal relationship with yourself, an alienated, judgmental master-slave dynamic where you are constantly whipping yourself into shape. On the other side, you have the path to true emotional health, the integrated self. Here, the core belief is radically different. Emotions aren't problems, they're vital signals to be heard, they're data. The primary goal isn't control, it's authenticity, it's growth, it's fully engaging with the messiness of life. And negative emotions? They're not signs of weakness at all, they're valuable sources of information and energy. Anger tells you a boundary has been violated. Sadness tells you you've lost something that mattered. Fear is trying to keep you safe. This path fosters a relationship with yourself that is connected, compassionate, and whole.
And the cost of trying to become that standardized product isn't just in your head. It's written all over your body. There's a powerful idea in trauma research that the body keeps the score. And it's absolutely true for emotional suppression, too. What the mind pushes down, the body is forced to express. The chronic, low-grade stress of constantly bottling up your feelings wreaks havoc on your physical systems. It's been scientifically linked to a weakened immune system, which is why chronically stressed people get sick more often. It contributes directly to cardiovascular disease by keeping your blood pressure and stress hormones like cortisol jacked up all the time. It disrupts our gut, our second brain, leading to things like irritable bowel syndrome. It messes with our hormones, our endocrine system. It can manifest as chronic pain, fatigue, and even skin conditions like eczema or psoriasis. There's even evidence it literally accelerates the aging process at a cellular level. The price for this fake stability is paid in the currency of our physical health.
Okay, that was a lot, and it's pretty heavy stuff. We've defined the tyranny, we've traced its history, we've seen how it works today, and we've counted the cost. So what now? The final part of this explainer is not about leaving you in despair. It's about empowerment. It's about hope. It's about mapping out a path to liberation, a way we can start to consciously dismantle this internal assembly line and reclaim our true, messy, vibrant, and fully human self.
And we arrive here at what is arguably the single most important step in this entire process. In fact, it's the very thing we've been doing this whole time. The first step to freedom is simply naming the tyranny. It's the act of understanding that this relentless pressure for constant stability is a systemic, cultural force. It is not a personal failing. Let me say that again. The shame you feel for feeling anxious, the guilt you feel for not being positive enough, that is not a reflection of your weakness. It is the product of an unhealthy, unrealistic societal demand. Just that realization, that shift in perspective, is profoundly liberating. It moves the problem from what's wrong with me to what's wrong with this expectation. It takes the blame off of your shoulders and places it on the system where it belongs. And that's where true change begins.
So if rigid robotic stability is the false idol, what should we be striving for instead? The answer from modern psychology is a beautiful and powerful concept called psychological flexibility.
This idea, which is at the core of approaches like acceptance and commitment therapy, or ACT, gives us a much healthier and more realistic ideal. Notice what it says. It's not the ability to feel good all the time. It's the ability to feel everything. The joy, the sadness, the anger, the fear, the whole messy human package. To make room for all of it inside you and still be able to choose your actions. It's about unhooking yourself from your fleeting moods so that your deeply held values can be your guide. It's about letting your inner compass, not the emotional weather, direct your life.
So, how do we actually cultivate this psychological flexibility? Well, we can break it down into a simple, practical 3-step path. First, you show up. This means when a difficult feeling arises, instead of your habitual reaction, which might be to run away or numb it or fight it, you gently turn toward it. You face it with an attitude of open curiosity, not harsh judgment. You just allow it to be there without feeling this frantic need to immediately fix it or get rid of it. You just say, "Hello, anxiety, I see you're here." Second, you step out. This is about creating a little bit of breathing room, a bit of space between you and your inner world. You learn to see your thoughts and feelings for what they are, just internal events. They are bits of data, not direct orders. A thought is just a string of words. An emotion is just a set of body sensations. You are the sky, and they are the weather passing through. You are not the storm. This space gives you freedom. And third, you walk your why. Once you've shown up to your feelings and stepped out to get some space, you're no longer being pushed around by them. And from that space, you can ask yourself, given what truly matters to me in life, what is the next right thing to do? You act based on your core values. You let your principles, not your pain, guide your feet. So you can feel fear and still give that important presentation. You can feel grief and still be a supportive friend. That is what true, flexible strength looks like.
And this path gives us a radically new definition of strength, one captured so perfectly here by the researcher Brené Brown. The tyranny of stability taught us that strength means being invulnerable. It means putting on armor, being impenetrable, never showing a crack in the facade. But what Brown's incredible research shows is that this is a lie. True courage is the exact opposite. It's the willingness to be vulnerable, the willingness to show up and be seen with all of our imperfections. And she argues that it's only from that place of vulnerability, that place of authentic, open-hearted living, that we can ever access the things we crave the most: genuine joy, true creativity, and deep, meaningful love and connection.
So, I want to leave you with one final image. I want you to picture a heart monitor in a hospital. What does a perfectly stable, predictable, flat line on that screen mean? We all know what it means. It means death. The bouncing, fluctuating, unpredictable, up and down line, the thing that looks messy and chaotic, that is the very signature of life itself. The same is absolutely true for your emotions. A life lived with a flat line of feeling, never too high, never too low, is not a sign of health. It's the emotional equivalent of that flat line. It's a sign that you've disconnected from the vitality of being human. The peaks of joy, the valleys of sadness, the sharp spike of anger, the flutter of anxiety, that fluctuation is not a sign of failure or sickness. It is the signature of a rich, engaged, and truly alive existence. And so the real question for all of us is not how do we force ourselves into a flat line, but how do we learn to live with the courage and the skill to ride the beautiful, messy, and life-giving waves.